Welcome back to Horror Stories. Today, we'll continue with the next chapter of the story, The Static That Remains. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and like the video so you don't miss any uploads from the channel. Thanks everyone. Part 4. The Static That Remains. The 20 minutes it took for Sheriff Brody's cruiser to arrive felt like a lifetime. Ilara and Caleb didn't speak, conserving their energy for the performance to come. They were two actors in a play of their own design, about to take the stage for the most important audience of their lives. Ilara ran a mental checklist, ensuring every part of their fabricated discovery narrative was logical and consistent. Caleb stood by the window watching the rain-slicked track, a silent, steady sentinel. The rotating red and blue lights of the patrol car were a jarring modern intrusion on the house's ancient gloom. They pulsed through the windows, painting the room in frantic alternating strokes of color, making the shadows dance. Sheriff Brody emerged from the car, his broad frame wrapped in a heavy-duty rain slicker. He was not alone. A younger, leaner deputy followed him, his eyes wide as he took in the imposing, malevolent silhouette of the kiln. Brody's boots crunched on the gravel. He paused on the porch, his gaze sweeping over the house, before landing on the front door which Ilara held open for him. His expression was unreadable, a careful mask of professional neutrality, but his eyes, weary and sharp, missed nothing. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You said you found something." "Sheriff, thank you for coming," Ilara said, her tone deliberately calm and measured. "Please come in." She and Caleb led them into the main room, to the island of light and technology that was her workstation. The deputy, whose name tag read Harris, lingered near the door, his hand resting instinctively on his sidearm, clearly unnerved by the house's oppressive atmosphere. "This is Caleb Thorne," Ilara said. "He owns the bookstore in town. He's been helping me research the history of the property." Brody nodded at Caleb, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Thorne, your family's been in this county forever." He turned his attention back to Ilara. "So what's this all about? Your dispatch said it was urgent." Ilara took a breath. The show began. "Sheriff, I know this is going to sound strange. As you know, the house has a reputation. I was unnerved when I first moved in, so Mr. Thorne was kind enough to lend me some historical material on the original owner, Heinrich Klein." She gestured to the open journal on the desk. "In my spare time, I started exploring the house's structure. I found a sealed-off room in the basement, the old kiln. Inside, I found this." Brody stepped forward and looked down at the journal, his thick fingers carefully turning a few of the brittle pages. He couldn't read the German, but the fanatical script, the bizarre diagrams mixing science and occultism, told their own story. "What is it?" he asked. "It's Klein's personal journal," Ilara explained. "I've been translating it. He was deeply disturbed. He was obsessed with recording sound, specifically the moment of death. The book is filled with accounts of his experiments." Brody's expression hardened. "Experiments?" "He writes about paying off the county infirmary to let him record the terminally ill." Caleb interjected, his voice heavy. "It gets worse. The later entries talk about needing stronger resonance, which he equated with traumatic, violent death." Brody looked from the journal to the two of them, his skepticism warring with a dawning sense of professional duty. "That's a disturbing piece of local history, but it's not a crime, not anymore." "Brody, I agree," Ilara said, moving to the next phase of the plan. "But one of his last entries gave me pause. It was specific. He talked about hiding something, a vessel beneath the kiln to act as the heart of the house. The language was unhinged, but it made me wonder if there was a sub-basement or a hidden cellar. Given the owner's state of mind, I was concerned about the structural integrity." She powered on her handheld spectrum analyzer, the screen glowing to life. "This is a contact mic analyzer, part of my professional kit. I use it to measure acoustic resonance and material density. I ran a sweep of the kiln floor." She showed him the screen. The jagged peak of the resonance spike was displayed in stark clinical green. The flagstones are solid granite. The feedback should be uniform. It's not. Right in the center of the room, my readings show a void. It's roughly 4 feet by 1.5 feet, buried about 3 feet down. It's not a cellar, it's a cavity, a deliberately created one. Brody stared at the screen, then back at the journal, then at Elara. The pieces were clicking into place for him, forming a picture that was grotesque and compelling. A madman's journal, a house with a dark history, a scientifically measured anomaly in the floor, and the ghost of a cold case that had haunted his career for decades. Sarah Rourke's car was found less than a mile from here. He said more to himself than to them. The connection had been made. He was silent for a long moment. The only sounds the drumming of the rain and the low hum of Elara's equipment. The lights overhead flickered once, twice, and then held steady. Deputy Harris shifted his weight nervously. "You're sure about these readings?" Brody finally asked Elara. "I testify to their accuracy in a court of law," she replied without hesitation. That was it. The final piece. Her professional certainty. Brody straightened up, his decision made. He was a man who dealt in facts, and Elara had just given him a set of verifiable, non-supernatural facts that demanded investigation. He turned to his deputy. "Harris, get on the radio. Call Judge Miller, wake him up if you have to. Tell him I need an emergency warrant to excavate a potential burial site at this location. Reference the Sarah Rourke cold case file. Then get a hold of Public Works and tell them I need a crew out here at first light with a concrete saw and a geoprobe." "Yes, sir," Harris said, looking relieved to have a concrete task. He retreated to the patrol car, his radio squawking to life. Brody turned back to Elara and Caleb. "I'm securing this house as a potential crime scene. I'll need you both to give official statements down at the station tomorrow. For tonight, you can't stay here." He looked around the room, a deep instinctual unease finally showing on his face. "Frankly, I wouldn't want to." As if on cue, a powerful gust of wind slammed against the house, making the great picture window groan in its frame. Outside, the rain intensified, coming down in near horizontal sheets. Brody's radio clipped to his shoulder crackled. "Advisory from the National Weather Service," a tinny voice announced through a burst of static. "A storm of unprecedented magnitude is expected to make landfall within the next 12 hours. All coastal residents are advised to secure their property and prepare for hurricane-force winds and severe flooding." The storm, the one Caleb had warned about in the town's legends, the kind that gave the echo power. It was coming. The excavation was set for the morning, but the house's true trial would be that night. "We're not leaving," Caleb said, his voice quiet but firm. Brody looked at him, about to argue. "The equipment is too sensitive to move in this weather," Elara added quickly, providing a practical excuse. "And I need to monitor it. We'll be fine. We'll stay in this room." Brody looked at them, then at the groaning window, then back. He didn't like it, but he was a practical man. "All right," he conceded. "But my deputy will remain on the property parked out front. You see or hear anything, you call him. Understood?" "Understood," Elara said. An hour later, the house was transformed. Yellow police tape was stretched across the front door and the entrance to the basement. Deputy Harris's cruiser sat at the end of the gravel track, a silent, watchful presence, and inside, Elara and Caleb prepared for the longest night of their lives. The excavation was coming. Justice was coming. But first, the storm was coming, and with it, the full, desperate fury of the entity they had cornered. Elara watched from the window as a public works truck rumbled up the track, its headlights cutting through the deepening twilight. It deposited a heavy-duty concrete saw and a set of shovels near the porch before driving away. The tools of exhumation lay waiting. The stage was set. Outside, the wind began to howl, a low, mournful sound, that was steadily rising in pitch like a scream gathering force. The real fight was about to begin. The storm arrived not as a front, but as a siege. The wind, which had been a rising howl, became a physical presence, a battering ram of solid air that slammed against the house in rhythmic, concussive blasts. The entire structure groaned, the ancient timbers screaming in protest. Rain came in torrents so thick, it seemed the ocean itself was being hurled at the windows. Inside their fragile sanctuary, the circle of salt and iron, Ilara and Caleb waited. Every light in the house flickered in a frantic, terrifying rhythm, with the thunder that cracked directly overhead, each flash of lightning bleaching the world outside in stark, momentary tableaus of a world gone mad. Trees bent, horizontal waves cresting over the top of the cliff. "It's using the storm's energy," Caleb said, his voice tight. He was holding the ironwood charm, his knuckles white. "It's drawing power from the static electricity from the chaos." As if to prove his point, the assault began. It started with the lights. They didn't just flicker now, they exploded. One by one, the bulbs in the main room burst in showers of sparks and glass, plunging them into a deeper darkness, lit only by the strobing lightning and the green glow of Ilara's battery-powered equipment. Then came the sound. Not the targeted whispers from before, but a tidal wave of noise that pressed in from all sides. It was the chorus of the dam, the full library of Klein's recordings, unleashed at once, amplified to a deafening roar. They were inside the machine now, and the volume was being turned to its absolute limit. The circle on the floor, their only defense, began to fail. The line of iron filings trembled and danced, skittering across the floorboards as if alive. The salt began to smoke, a thin, acrid vapor rising from the floor. "It's too strong," Ilara yelled over the cacophony. "The circle isn't going to hold." And then the echo played its masterstroke. In the center of the room, just beyond the collapsing perimeter, the air began to shimmer and distort like heat haze off asphalt. The swirling static coalesced, knitting itself together into a form. A small, translucent figure of a girl in a simple dress, her face pale and her eyes wide with a century of terror. It was the child from the lullaby recording. She didn't speak. She just stood there, her silent, spectral form more horrifying than any scream, a shield of innocence for the monster to hide behind. Another figure began to form beside her. A man, his clothes ragged, his face a mask of panic. The trespasser. He raised a hand, his mouth opening in a silent plea, the sound of his murder, the wet final crunch echoing around them. The echo was manifesting its victims, using their stolen trauma as an army. It was a spectacle of horror designed to paralyze them with pity and dread. But the entity had saved its cruelest weapon for last. The figures of the victims dissolved and a new one took their place. A tall, sharp-suited man, his form more solid, more defined, cobbled together from the fabric of Ilara's most vivid and painful memories. Martin Rexford. The acoustic hologram turned its head, and its dead, static-filled eyes found hers. "There she is." The prosecutor's voice boomed, perfectly synthesized, overriding the storm and the chorus of the dead. The star witness, a woman who hears voices in the silence. "Tell the court, Ms. Vance, are these the ghosts you brought here today? Or are they just another pattern you've found, another fantasy you've spun from your own professional disgrace?" The figure took a step forward, crossing the now broken line of salt as if it weren't there. Ilara felt her breath catch, her resolve fracturing under the hyper-specific personal assault. This was her nightmare given form and voice. "Ilara, don't look at it. Don't listen," Caleb shouted, grabbing two of the heavy iron railroad spikes and holding them out like a cross. "It's not real," but it felt real, and it was winning. Then through the fog of terror, a single cold thought cut through. A piece of data, coherent, structured sound. The voices, the figures, the prosecutor's speech, it was all complex, organized information. A signal, And every signal, no matter how complex, has an inverse. Every sound can be cancelled. The signal, Elara breathed, her eyes snapping into focus. It's all a signal. She lunged for her workstation, her fingers flying across the console. The echo, sensing the shift in her, raised its hand and pointed an accusatory finger. She is unstable, delusional, and her testimony is worthless. Wrong. Elara grunted, plugging cables, rerouting power from the batteries, her mind a blur of frequencies and waveforms. My testimony is data. She pulled up a signal generator, a program capable of creating any sound wave she could design. She didn't want a single frequency. She wanted all of them. Pure, chaotic, unstructured noise. She cranked the gain, pushing the portable amplifier she'd brought to its absolute limit. "What are you doing?" Caleb yelled. "Fighting sound with sound," she yelled back. "It's a being of pure signal. I'm going to give it pure noise. Cover your ears." Caleb dropped the spikes and jammed his fingers in his ears. Elara took a deep breath and slammed her hand down on the execute button. It was not a sound. It was an anti-sound. A physical wave of pressure, a wall of multi-layered chaotic white noise that erupted from her speakers. It was the sound of a waterfall and a hurricane and a million television sets tuned to a dead channel all at once. It was the sound of everything and nothing. The effect on the acoustic hologram was immediate and violent. The figure of Rexford convulsed its form, dissolving into a blizzard of static. The chorus of victims' voices was shredded, torn apart by the cleansing, chaotic roar of the white noise. The echo shrieked a sound of pure electronic agony, 1,000 voices screaming in unison as their cohesion was ripped away. The house shook to its foundations. The remaining windows shattered, exploding inward in a spray of glass and rain. It fought back. It focused all its remaining energy, all its stolen rage and pain, into one last desperate form. Not a victim, not a memory, but a pillar of pure black static, a swirling vortex of raw hatred that lunged across the room straight for Elara and her machine. At that exact moment, a bolt of lightning struck the cliffside just outside the house. The world went white. There was a sound like the sky being torn in half, and a massive surge of power blew through the house's ancient wiring. Elara's equipment exploded. The monitors shattered. The amplifier blew with a shower of blue sparks, and the speakers went dead. And then silence. A profound, absolute silence broken only by the now muffled sound of the wind and rain outside. The electronic scream was gone. The voices were gone. The pressure in the air was gone. They were left in total darkness, the smell of ozone and burnt electronics hanging heavy in the air. Elara lay on the floor, thrown back by the blast, her ears ringing. A few feet away, Caleb groaned. "You okay?" She managed to gasp, pushing herself up. "I think so," he coughed. It's over. It's gone." The immediate threat was gone. The entity, its structure torn apart by the white noise and its power source severed by the lightning strike, had been broken. They had survived. They were wounded, exhausted, and sitting in the dark, wrecked heart of a haunted house with a hurricane still raging outside. But they had won. They had silenced the ghosts. The first light of dawn was pale and bruised, filtering through the tattered curtains of the storm clouds. The world outside was a wreck. Ancient trees were snapped like twigs. The cliffside was eroded and scarred, and the air, scrubbed clean by the tempest, smelled of salt, wet earth and ozone. Inside the house, the devastation was just as profound. The main room was a graveyard of shattered glass and fried electronics. But the silence was absolute. The oppressive, intelligent weight that had saturated the house for a century was gone. All that remained was a deep, profound emptiness. It felt like a house and nothing more. Elara and Caleb sat amidst the wreckage, wrapped in dusty blankets, from a linen closet nursing mugs of lukewarm water. They were exhausted, bruised, but alive. They had watched the dawn break together, a silent testament to their shared survival. The crunch of tires on gravel announced the return of the world. Sheriff Brody's cruiser pulled up, followed by a public works truck and a coroner's van. Brody stepped out, his face etched with concern as he took in the shattered windows and the general state of destruction. "The storm hit you hard," he said, his eyes sweeping over the interior damage. It was the perfect rational explanation. He didn't need another one. "It was a rough night," Elara said, the understatement hanging in the air. The work began with a grim professional efficiency. The crew under Brody's watchful eye brought the concrete saw into the kiln. The sound of its gas engine starting was a profane roar in the quiet basement. But to Elara, it was the sound of imminent justice. She and Caleb stood in the basement doorway, unwilling to enter the kiln chamber again, but unable to leave. They watched as the saw's diamond blade bit into the ancient flagstones, sending up a spray of water and stone dust. The crew worked for over an hour, carefully cutting a rectangle in the floor exactly where Elara's data had indicated the void. When the cut was complete, they used crowbars to pry the heavy section of stone loose. It lifted with a groan of protest, revealing a space beneath. A dark, hollow space, filled with packed earth. A hush fell over the crew. Brody knelt at the edge of the opening, shining a powerful flashlight into the hole. The air filled with the cold, musty smell of earth that had not been disturbed in a very long time. Two men began to dig carefully, respectfully with hand trowels. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then one of the men stopped. "Sheriff," he said, his voice hushed. "I've got something." He reached into the hole and carefully brushed away the dirt. A small white object was revealed, a button carved from mother of pearl. Then the delicate skeletal remains of a small hand. Elara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. A wave of profound, aching sorrow washed over her for the little girl who had wanted to go home and had instead become the foundation of a monster. Caleb put a steadying hand on her shoulder. The exhumation was completed in somber silence. They found the nearly complete skeleton of a young girl curled in on herself. Clutched in her hand was a small tin toy soldier. The cause of death would be impossible to determine after so long, but the circumstances were indictment enough. Later, as the coroner's team was respectfully bagging the remains, Sheriff Brody approached Elara and Caleb. He looked from the open grave to Elara, his professional mask finally cracking to reveal the weary, haunted man beneath. "Your acoustic readings were accurate, Miss Vance," he said, the words feeling inadequate. "I don't know how you knew, and to be honest, I don't think I want to, but you did." He looked back at the house, a deep shudder running through his broad frame. "We're sealing this place. It's the primary crime scene in a homicide investigation going back to 1927. And with this discovery, I'm formally reopening the Sarah Rourke case. We're going to tear this house apart board by board if we have to. We're going to find out every last one of its secrets." He had found his evil a human evil he could understand. Heinrich Klein, the madman. The house was just a place. For Brody, the ghost had been given a name and a face, and that was enough. Justice, the real-world procedural kind, had finally begun. Elara knew better. The evil had been more than just a man, but she also knew that the house was quiet now. They had broken its terrible heart. Epilogue. 6 months later. The coffee shop was bright and loud, filled with the cheerful, chaotic sounds of a Tuesday morning. The hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of ceramic, the low hum of a dozen conversations. Elara sat at a small table by the window, a new laptop open in front of her, the sunlight warm on her face. She had moved to a small, anonymous apartment in Portland, a city big enough to get lost in. She was rebuilding. The news from Astoria had been sporadic but significant. The remains found beneath the kiln had been identified through church records, and a distant surviving relative as those of 6-year-old Eileen O'Connell. who had been reported missing by her parents in August 1927, Heinrich Klein was now officially a murderer. The discovery had also shaken loose a new lead in the Sarah Rourke case. A sealed box of Klein's personal effects in a county storage locker had contained a series of unlabeled audio tapes from the 1980s. The investigation was active and ongoing. The kiln itself, after being forensically dismantled by the state police, had been condemned and was slated for demolition. Caleb's bookstore was thriving, its owner, now a reluctant local celebrity and the foremost expert on the county's darkest chapter. He and Elara emailed every few weeks, two veterans checking in on each other, forever bonded by the war they had survived. Elara had taken a new job, a quiet, stable position doing audio restoration for a university archive. No forensics, no whispers, just the gentle crackle of old newsreels and historical speeches. She was healing. Her phone buzzed. It was a call from her new boss. She picked it up, putting in her noise-canceling earbuds to block out the cafe's din. "Hi, David," she said. "Elara, hi." His voice came through clear and professional. "Quick question about the Stockton address recording." They spoke for a few minutes about work, a normal conversation on a normal day. As he was finishing a sentence, his connection momentarily wavered, the digital signal breaking up. For a split second, there was a gap in the audio, a pocket of dead air. And in that perfect digital silence, she heard it. It was not a voice. It was not a word. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible fragment of a sound buried deep in the electronic hiss of the phone line. A faint, familiar, sibilant whisper, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Elara froze her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Her blood ran cold. The entity in the house had been a parasite of sound, anchored to a physical place. But she had fought it with technology. She had blasted its coherent structure apart with a wave of pure chaotic data, a digital exorcism. The lightning strike had overloaded the system, sending a massive surge of energy through every wire. She had not destroyed it. She had released it. It was no longer a ghost in a house. It had been shattered into a million pieces and scattered into the global network. A ghost in the machine, a whisper in the wires, a fragment of a forgotten agony now adrift in the endless humming static of the modern world. David's voice cut back in oblivious. "So if you could get that done by 3, Elara, are you there?" "Yes," she managed to say, her voice a hollow whisper. "I'm here." She ended the call and slowly took the earbuds out. But the silence they provided was no longer a comfort. She knew that from now on, for the rest of her life, she would be listening. And in the quiet moments, in the static between stations, in the silence on the line, she knew it would be listening for her too. And so Elara survived. The storm passed. The sun rose and the mundane world of law and order arrived to claim the house. The little girl Eileen O'Connell was finally found, her century-long silence broken. It seemed like justice, a neat and tidy end to a nightmare born from a madman's obsession. The house was condemned, its terrible heart finally exposed. But some echoes are not so easily silenced. Some static can never be fully cleansed. Months later, sitting in a bright, noisy coffee shop, Elara believed she was healing. She was safe, surrounded by the normal sounds of a normal life. But during a routine phone call, the digital signal momentarily broke up. In that split second of perfect electronic silence, she heard it. A faint, familiar, sibilant whisper, hiding in the hiss of the connection. In that horrifying moment, she knew the truth. She hadn't destroyed the entity. She had shattered it. The blast of white noise and the surge of lightning hadn't killed it. They had liberated it. She had released it from its physical prison and blasted its fragments into the digital world. A ghost no longer in a house, but a ghost in the machine. A whisper in the wires, a fragment of forgotten agony now adrift in the endless humming static of our modern world. So the next time you're on a call and the line crackles, The next time you hear a strange hiss from your speakers in a quiet room, listen closely. You might not be alone. The static that remains might just be listening for you too. Thank you for joining us for this terrifying tale on horror stories. What did you think of that ending? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe for more horror. Until next time, stay safe and be careful what you listen for in the silence.